Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. And welcome to another edition of Sabbath Sunday. This is where Darin and I get together with you on Sundays to discuss all things Black Sabbath. Darin and I have a Black Sabbath podcast that I will link in the description down below for you to check out. So for today's episode, Darin and I are going to share with you our picks for our 5 favorite epic songs from the Ozzy era. We're going to go through the different eras. We're going to do Dio for another Sabbath Sunday, and then we'll probably do one that just sort of catches the rest of the singers. But for today, our 5 favorite epic songs from the Ozzy eras. And Darin's going to start us with number 5, but before he starts, he's also going to give us his definition of what an epic song is, his criteria for his picks, because it is something that's a little nebulous, I think for different people that can kind of mean different things. So for you, Darin, what does epic mean to you in this context?
It's totally relevant to this context as far as my definition this evening. So the criteria was, the Ozzy era isn't really known for an epic song or epic songs as much as other eras, especially the Dio era. I mean, we start to get into some of the songs on Mob Rules, and it's obvious what an epic is, and it's like the way that Dio's lyrics would turn a song, take Iommi's riffs and Dio's lyrics and his melodies and everything would construct this. The only thing you can call it is an epic because it's like a story and it's just building on creative words and phrases and things like that. With the Ozzy era, we don't have as much of that. A lot of the lyrics are mostly, and of course, Geezer's responsible for the lyrics, and we've gone into that in detail several times. So it's not really so much Ozzy as it is Geezer. But during the time, and a lot of it probably has to do with the context in the 70s, where there was still a bit of contemporary influence as far as the songwriting was concerned. And so we don't have what would later develop in the 80s taking place in the 70s. So we have to qualify epic as it pertains to the Ozzy era. And the way that I define it in the Ozzy era is a lengthy song with a lot of different movements. Vocally, there'll be different melodies, sometimes a range of emotions. And that's how I qualify an epic relative to the Ozzy era. So for this show, my definition of an epic is completely relevant to the Ozzy era. When we do our next show with the Dio, then we'll elaborate on that, and the definition will change ever so slightly. But for today, it has to do with the length of the song, the musical movements, the lyrics too will also play into that. But something just that sets it apart within the album that makes one song stand out from another that has more of a compact arrangement, length of time. That's where I'm coming from with what I consider the criteria for finding my 5 epic Ozzy era songs.
Okay, I would agree with that. That's pretty much what I did also. It's got to have some length to it. It's got to be a little longer than your typical, than like a 3.5-minute song, for instance. There has to be maybe some tempo changes, some different sections within the song. It's a little trickier with Ozzy. Like, I know what you mean about having more different melody lines and stuff like that, but sometimes during the Ozzy era, you don't get as much as that. The band will just sometimes play, go through a whole bunch of different musical sections before Ozzy comes back in. Whereas I think with Dio asserts himself a little bit more. Dio's like, hey, I ain't sitting out for 5 minutes while you guys, go through all these different things. I'm going to sing over that, whereas Ozzy, I think, would on occasion just sort of sit back and let the guys, do their thing. But yeah, that's pretty much the exact same thing for me. So, all right. So what do you have at number 5?
Number 5 for me is Megalomania off of Sabotage. It's one of the lengthier songs, coming in at 9 minutes and 42 seconds. So it checks that box. A lot of different musical movements within this. Starts off with that murky bass, that
Mhm.
bubbling bass, and Ozzy's voice with the slapback echo, and it's sort of an intro into the song. Then it moves into the part where it has the piano, da na 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 da da na,
Mhm.
and then it just slams into that heavy, dark, evil riff, and it rides on that wave for most of the song, and then the keyboards come back, and it has like this twinkling thing. The song really takes you on a journey. The lyrics in most of Sabotage, as we know, is inspired by the trials and tribulations of their legal woes that they were going through at the time and all that stuff. So it was a difficult time in the band. So there's a lot of anger. There's kind of a range of emotions in this song, and um, that's why I think this qualifies as an epic
Okay.
because of like I said, there's a lot of different musical
Sure.
movements and lyrics and emotions and things like that. So Megalomania is my number 5 pick.
Okay. All right. My number five. Uh, I almost put a warning in this place, but because it was a cover song, I didn't feel right about putting it in there. And I'm going to add one other thing to to what I need in an epic too. There has to be sort of this grand epic vibe to most of the song or some part of the song, or it's got to build and have some sort of climactic, big moment to it. So for me, my first pick at number five at 7 minutes and 57 seconds is War Pigs.
Okay.
And I pick War Pigs now. Like Ozzy doesn't have a whole lot in this. He pretty much just has those verses, and uh, but the way Ozzy sings those verses, I think, is very epic with just him by himself and the hi hat going in the background. I think that the intro to the song is very epic with just those big hanging chords, especially if when you with the air raid siren thing that gives it a very ominous, epic kind of feel. And it really, for me, it's the way the song builds towards the end, where it hits that down, 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 down. That to me is epic. That's triumphant. That's like people playing, horns or something going into battle. And
Sure. Yeah.
I just think War Pigs always had this sort of big, grand uh, you know, feel to it. And I think it's the subject matter. I even think the melody that Ozzy sings in that, the way it's just him there, and the way that song builds up to that end section with that big, huge drum fill from Bill Ward, and then it kicks into that end section. To me, that's just that's epic. And they tagged it. This is maybe subconsciously this plays into the epic thing. Sabbath back then was putting those like tags on the different songs. So you have War Pigs, Luke's Wall, and that
Sure.
kind of makes it seem, anytime you have a song that has multiple parts to it, like when we get into like more progressive bands like Yes and Rush and King Crimson and stuff like that. When you have a song and it's got a, part one, part two, part three,
Yeah.
that
A,
just
B,
makes
and
it epic.
C,
So
and Roman numerals and everything else.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, that's just kind of maybe Sabbath's way of doing that. So that comes in for me, really their first, big sort of grand epic for me is War Pigs at number five.
Yeah, I had War Pigs on my list too. I'm going to take it off because there's no point in both of us talking about it. Mine was a little higher on the list, though. I think that was a better example, or probably one of the most prominent examples of an Ozzy era Black Sabbath epic song. But for number 4, I'm going to switch things around a little bit. And my number 4 is going to be Junior's Eyes off the Never
Mm,
Die. Emotional content. It's not the longest song in Sabbath's Ozzy era, but it's about 6.5 minutes long, so it's long enough, longer than most of the other songs on the album. Range of emotions, musical movements, that slow intro. Again, it's kind of similar to Megalomania. Instead of being an angry song, it's a very melancholy song. The lyrics were written by Geezer, basically about Ozzy and the loss of Ozzy's dad, and it affected them all emotionally. So it's kind of an emotional song. Um, but the jazzy beginning, or the way that it
Yeah.
just volume kind of just creeps in, and it just is a very subtle introduction of the song, and almost like it
Mhm.
kind of sneaks in, slips in there. I think that adds to a little bit of the drama. Lyrics are dramatic. Like as far as the musical movements, it gets to a point where it's rocking, gets a little louder. There's some dynamics into it. Bill Ward's those fills he does,
Yeah.
powerful fills. So yeah, I think there's a lot of epic qualities about Junior's Eyes. So it makes my list and it comes in at number 4.
Cool. Yeah, that almost got on my list too for all the reasons that you said. Okay, number 4 for me, I'm gonna go with Wheels of Confusion. That comes in at 8 minutes and 2 seconds. Is that another one that you picked? uh it's got this different sections to it, and especially because of the ending, the way the song sort of stops, sort of hits that chord, and then it goes into that other section. And I think also what makes this one epic is it's kind of a pretty just like one guitar basically in the beginning, but when that end section kicks in, ba-dum, down, 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 ba-dum, it's like it opens up. If you're listening to that with headphones on, it's like all of a sudden there's a bunch of guitars, and there's two guitars soloing at the same time, and it just gets very like busy. And Ozzy's melody in it, and yeah, the subject matter is kind of just his melody line and everything. And I think the way the words work in that song and the changes, and but for me it really sells it is that section, which again gets another sort of name, the straightener,
Yeah. Oh,
that
yeah, that's
section at
awesome.
the end. So
Yeah. Yeah. So River Confusion was my pick too. The Straightener. I love that. When I was a kid and I got the album, I loved that. I would just listen to it over and over and over again. It just had this strange quality about it. It was so odd for a heavy metal or a heavy rock song, but it just was so cool, and I love that. I also love so this will be my number 3, Wheels of Confusion. So I'm not gonna take this off my list. Um, so Wheels of Confusion, I love it's so weighted in the beginning, and I thought, and I still do. I still think it's a strange idea for an album opener. Usually, you want something that's a little bit more rallying, get
yeah,
things with a good energy. This just kind of is like you're walking along and then you just fall off a cliff, and it's just like,
yeah,
whoa, just like laying this big, heavy, hard rock blues thing on you. And it goes along with that for a little while, and then it kind of like gets into this middle part where I guess it would probably qualify as the Martin Popoff Geronimo riff. It's like, okay, now we're gonna get
yeah,
funky, now we're gonna rock. And it all, of course, it follows suit with the lyrics. I mean, the lyrics take you on a journey, so there's another criteria for the epic quality. The lyrics are basically taking you on a ride for the length of the song, 8 minutes or so. But then it gets into this middle part where it just starts rocking, and it's really cool. And then it takes you back down again into the
yeah.
beginning, and then out with the straightener. So there's enough musical movements in this song with just the length alone, but also the quality of the movements, the variation, the dynamics. I think Wheels of Confusion is definitely a good Ozzy era epic.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the intro, because the intro is very, just sort of big, those hanging chords. And I love when I think
Oh,
Iommi is at his best when he's just playing like simple melody lines. Like he's just kind of holding notes out, bending them, playing these just simple kind of little melodies. And it just sounds so big. And then when it drops into that main riff and everybody sort of drops out for a second, and it's just the guitar on the da 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 da. It's almost a little funky, and Bill comes in with that drum beat, that big fill, and then they all come in. It's yeah, good stuff.
mhm.
All right, I think you're going to have this one on your list, and I'm pretty much at the point where I think everything else I have on my list, I think you're going to have on your list. But let's see. All right, so this is number 3 for me. 7 minutes and 13 seconds. Dirty Women.
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right. So Dirty Women makes my list. Uh this one maybe has more to do with Iomi, that outro solo. I almost went with Gypsy because Gypsy has a lot of changes in it, but I kind of went with Dirty Women just because of the way. And I'm going to give this one to Iomi. It has to do with that outro solo and Iomi's playing on this and just that whole second half of the song. I think it's a real Iomi showcase, and he turns it into a big epic number, which it would turn into in their live setting. Often it was a big showcase for Tony to stretch out. So Dirty Women comes in at number 3 for me.
Yeah, Dirty Women, is solo at the end. That's probably I always consider that one of Tony's more developed, one of his better solos. It's
Yeah.
really, really good, and it does make the song have somewhat of an epic quality. And it is. I mean, I understand your rationale, and I agree with that. But I went with Gypsy. So I'm glad you put Dirty Women because I wanted to get Technical Ecstasy in on this list. I've forsaken my Technical Ecstasy in the last few shows and last few lists that we've done. So I wanted to get something from Technical Ecstasy in this and Gypsy. But Gypsy fits the criteria as far as I'm concerned. It has a cinematic quality, a lot of
Yep.
different movement. It's got some sound effects going on. It really takes you into the story. I also like that the lyrics are fantasy based too. So that also kind of um, gets into an epic quality along those lines of something that kind of tells a story. So I like that about it, but I like the drums in the beginning. It has that section, and then it goes into the section after that where it's more of a sing-songy kind of a thing, sets it up, and then you hear the piano ding 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 ding,
Yeah.
boom boom. It's almost like it's a soundtrack to a movie or something like that.
Yeah.
So Gypsy definitely it's pretty high on my list. We're at number 2, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, number 2 for me is Gypsy. I think it's pretty representative of an Ozzy era epic song.
And especially at the end of that song when he's doing this, so you wanna be a gypsy, and those background vocals. Now, the way it just sort of builds there it's just great. And I think the Technical Ecstasy remix really brings out some of those extra
Yeah.
background vocals and stuff because the end of the song gets very busy. There's soloing and there's all this stuff going on, and it just builds really fantastically. Okay, I figured you'd represent Technical Ecstasy. This one I really think you're going to have on your list at 6 minutes and 16 seconds. Number 2 for me is Into the Void.
Nope.
No, okay. Uh, got a lot of changes to it. It's got the intro that drops down into that big heavy riff. The subject matter is very apocalyptic and thus very kind of epic. You've got the fast section, freedom fighters been on to, and then the way it drops back down into that big dinosaur riff and the end of it too, the way it ends with just that ja 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 ja. There's like a
Yeah.
reverb or something
Yeah.
on it. It's a great, come to think of it. Let me see here. Well, no, that's only the second. Dirty Women closes Technical Ecstasy, and Into the Void closes Master Reality. That's sometimes too that like an epic is a great way to take out an album or take out a side of an album or something. But
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
so Into the Void for me, just for all those tempo changes and the feel change, to feel the beginning, the way it's kind of swingy, and then it drops down into a kind of a real, straight thing. So early Sabbath, just at their best.
Yeah, definitely. And it qualifies for an epic for sure. But number 1 for me is Black Sabbath. Not particularly long. It's 6 minutes and 20 seconds, but it's the quality, the cinematic, the taking you into the atmosphere. All the years I've been listening to this song, every single time I listen to it, I'm in that stone dungeon room, and there's a throne in front of me, and there's Lucifer, black finger pointing at me. I always see that as the visual, and I think that qualifies this song as an epic. If it paints a picture in my mind because of the visuals and the atmosphere in the song, and of course, not a lot of different movements, but what there is really effective. Of course, the between the note drum pattern of Bill
Mhm.
Ward, the lot of reverb, filling the song up with a lot of atmosphere, and combine that with the lyrics, the way that Ozzy delivers the lyrics, almost acting in a way, and oh no, no,
Yeah, yeah.
and then of course at the end when it comes into that crescendo, it's a movement that feel qualifies as kind of have an epic like part to it, and brings it to a close, and right before the curtain closes, you have the finale of the song. So, and it's also a song that it's kind of, it's the namesake. It's This song had an effect on people. I mean, you read interviews with people and artists and things like that, and they'll often reference this song as how it scared them. I think that
Yeah.
an emotional content also qualifies it as an epic. So even though it's not, doesn't really fit the criteria as far as the length of time, I think that at 6 minutes and 20 seconds, it crams a lot of emotion and a lot of things that fit the criteria for an
Yeah.
epic. The number one for me is Black Sabbath.
Yeah, that one definitely for the mood, it just and the rain and the bell at the beginning. Yeah, that makes it, gives it a
Yeah, right.
certain
Yeah.
epic quality. I always say, like, I'm a sucker for choirs, bells, like church bell. You throw a church bell into a song for me, and it immediately like gets my heart rate going. And it's like, yeah, this is epic, for whom the bell tolls, Metallica, that's just it just a tolling bell just makes everything sound epic. So even though this is a little bit of a smaller sounding bell, it's still just the thunderclap and
Yeah.
everything and the rain at the beginning and the way it ends on that like da 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 this that little extra sort of tag on the
Yeah.
end there. It just builds, really really well from the ominous beginning all the way through. But that's
Right.
not my number one. That's a great pick though. My number one, you already called it. I didn't want to take it off my list though because I feel it's very deserving of number one, and it's Megalomania. Like you said, 9 minutes 42 seconds. It's got all kinds of stuff going on, and in this one is a real Ozzy tour de force. I mean, Ozzy moves through a whole bunch of different
Oh yeah.
sections in this song, and that spot, try to hide, da, 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 he is just way up in his range.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he was never able to quite pull that off live, but this is one where to me, like Ozzy really takes over this one, all these different sections. And as I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, sometimes Ozzy lays out when the band is shifting through all different tempos and things like that. But here he's right there. And again, the way the song builds and that's kind of the unique thing about Black Sabbath. They were never really like a verse chorus type of band. Their hooks there were hooks in the riffs, like Wheels of Confusion. There isn't really a chorus in
No.
that song. He's not singing Wheels of Confusion over and over at some point in the song, but the melody line is just so catchy, and the riffs are just so catchy. They're all hooks, and it's
Yeah.
the same thing here with Megalomania. All these different uh sections in the song, and just the way Ozzy so menacing in the beginning of the song, and the way the energy builds and the end of the song where it's just like all this stuff is
Oh, it's all like.
going on, and like, yeah, Ozzy's voice is like, there's like some
Yeah.
sort of effect on his voice, like yeah 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 yeah, yeah. It's like
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
coming in and out, and it just guitars all over the place and just all
Yeah.
this stuff going on, and when it hits that last chord, it just sort of hangs there for a second. To me, it's one of their biggest like studio triumphs, meaning like them using this a great song and really using the studio to its full extent. I think Sabotage in general is probably their most adventurous album in the studio as far as like layering things and having vocals and guitars and bells and things going on. And I just think Megalomania is just so epic, and the way it builds and everything. It's just
Yeah.
fantastic song.
Yeah, they really use the studio well to embellish some of the ideas and the movements within the song Megalomania. And there's a lot of things where if you're just listening, you close your eyes, it does kind of take you into the cinematic thing. I keep bringing that back up because I think that really qualifies part of the criteria for epic for me anyway. And it's like that part that you mentioned where Ozzy's like his voice is kind of fading with,
Yeah.
with maybe a fader where they're like bringing his voice in and out, "Ah," and
Yeah.
almost being picked up and carried away. And this is a song that in my mind, I always picture Henry, the demon, when that riff kicks in, I just see that demon and like spreading its wings and taking flight. Um, so yeah, this conjures up a lot of images for me and all the different movements. And you're right, Ozzy really gets into it. He really does a lot of different things, and he reacts to the different sounds of the guitar and the orchestration, or at least the piano and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a serious win on Sabotage. The Writ was also, I was kind of going between the Writ and
Yeah.
Megalomania, but I went with Megalomania because of the length. But the Writ has a lot of, and Megalomania, because of the length, also has some more movements in it that uh, better exemplify the epic quality. But the Writ has a lot of epic qualities too.
Yeah.
When it starts off and it's coming off the tail end of "Am I Going Insane" with a
Yeah.
laugh and that stuff, and then you hear again that the bubbling, probably more so the bubbling bass. It's like
Yeah.
brewing. It's like a real brooding intro into the song, and it slams into it. Like, what kind of people do you think we are?
Yeah.
Really effective, very emotional, and this is probably the Red is the angriest song on the album. But I didn't want to pick two from Sabotage, so I was like one or the other, and I went with Megalomania. But the
Yeah.
Red,
I even thought about Super Czar just because of
yeah,
the whole choir thing. And, it just has this, it's like an opera, all the voices and everything. And it's such when you hear that, kick in, before they come on stage. When I was younger, and I think it might have been when I got the Never Say Die video, I had seen little clips of them live, like at the Beat Club and stuff on TV, but that was the first like concert from beginning to end. And I just remember like when that Super Czar is playing and the pilot thing drops down, I was just like, oh man, this is so cool. And it had like the still shots of the guys, before it started. And I mean, yeah, Ozzy even sort of took that with his own band when he had the Carmina Burana, Carl Orff, that classical piece. And that always sort of, those two things, I think, remind me of each other. So yeah. All right. Well, there you go. There's Darren and I. There's our picks for our 5 favorite epics from the Ozzy era. Let us know what you think of our picks. What would your picks be if you have maybe a different criteria, a different standard by which you judge a song as epic or not? Let us know. Let us know in the comments down below. What does it for you to be an epic song in this context? Because like Darren said, it changes as the decades go along and as the band changes. So, all right, let us know in the comments down below. Make sure you check out our podcast, and we will see you at the next Sabbath Sunday.